The Philadelphia 76ers have now dropped 15 of their past 17 games as their focus continues to be on maximizing those lottery odds with the season winding down. We have a couple new faces to talk about on the Sixers team as injuries continue to ravage this roster and the organization essentially has become a rotating force of borderline functional NBA bodies. In addition, we have the NBA continuing to meddle with the Sixers' intentions of maximizing those very same draft opportunities as another investigation has been lost into this organization. Going to touch into it all in this video here. Very excited to keep plugging through the news that we have with this team. It is never boring, even if it is not always the most entertaining on-court product, but for what it's worth, a decent performance last night against the Indiana Pacers. Going to touch on all those takeaways here, but before I dive fully into it, do want to remind you guys to make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 32.4% of you guys watching the video, that's all that subscribed so far. So we got to get those numbers up. It is moving in the right direction and appreciate each and every one of you guys hopping on board, but there are better days ahead for this Sixers organization and want as many people as part of this Sixers Digest family as possible. So with that said, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsor and get right back to the action after this. We are kicking off a March Madness pool for the channel by partnering with the Hot Takes app and other Digest channels for this event. It is completely free to sign up. Just download the Hot Takes app, click the March Madness banner at the top, and under group select the Digest Media pool. This is really exciting as there's over $25,000 in prizes to be won, and since there's a much smaller pool of people participating, there's a real chance in winning big compared to other bracket challenges out there. Check out the link below or scan the QR code to download the app and make sure to use promo code DIGEST in all caps to get exclusive perks when signing on. Again, this is completely free, and if you have any issues whatsoever, just use the email down below. We are excited to see you in this March Madness pool. Now let's get into the topic of the video today. And I do assure you guys you will have a much more enjoyable time getting involved in that contest and watching the March Madness action than the latest state of this Sixers team. Now, with all that being said there, I do want to acknowledge what led up to the events leading up to today's game before I dive into the actual box score. And with that, we got an update from Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer earlier today that the 76ers are signing Oshae Brissett to a 10-day contract according to sources. The Sixers were granted a roster hardship exemption to sign an additional player to a 10-day contract. So another player brought in. We got our first look at him in tonight's game. Kind of an interesting story with Oshae Brissett. He started off his NBA career with the Indiana Pacers, who he faced tonight. He's had some experience with Nick Nurse, particularly with the Canadian national team and coaching up there. He is a guy who Nurse has spoken quite highly of in past. There's a couple clips floating around from interviews kind of in regards with the level of play that Brissett can compete at, particularly rebounding the basketball was an area that Nurse extremely highlighted there. So we got to look at him in action tonight. And do want to circle back to the investigation in a second, but to highlight the box score or what went down in the matchup with the Pacers, it was a 112-100 victory by Indiana there. The Sixers put up a fight in this one. This was one of their more tolerable performances of late. A quick shout out to Jeff Doughton for a career high 24 points. Also added 5 rebounds and 4 assists, a pair of steals there as well. The best game of his NBA career, and a guy that I do think is inching in the right direction to securing an NBA future, even if that is not with the Philadelphia 76ers there. And that is what this is about for those guys still on the court. To keep looking around this roster, we got 16 points and 9 rebounds from Adem Bona. Also added a block and 2 steals, and frankly felt like a lot more from that from a rim protection standpoint. I love the activity from Bona. That is a guy I have my eyes on for the future, and I do think in the long term could develop into that primary backup center option for this Sixers team. But to keep it moving, Ricky Council, we got 14 points off him, added 4 rebounds, 5 of 14 from the field, and 2 of 8 from 3 is not great there. Thought it was a fine Ricky game. You know, the level of expectations has certainly lowered for a lot of these players based on the current state of this roster. And the man of the hour, Oshae Brissett off the bench, in his 23 minutes of action, added 14 points, had a rebound, a steal, and a block there. Shot 3 of 5 from beyond the three-point arc, and thought he looked pretty solid. He looked like a competent NBA player. It is just a 10-day contract he's on, so I'm not going to dive too deep into his future. It is nice that they're just kind of rotating through these functional bodies and essentially giving guys tryouts. That is what this is about, and frankly, I do see a world where Brissett is a long-term NBA player. He has not stuck to this point, had an opportunity with the Indiana Pacers, started with the Boston Celtics, had a chance there for about half a season as well. And to kind of touch into his full stats here, I will pull up at the NBA level that he did spend the first 3 years of his career with the Indiana Pacers, a brief stint with the Toronto Raptors, and also with the Boston Celtics as As I mentioned, he is a Nick Nurse guy that has been spoken of incredibly highly by the Sixers head coach there. I don't have high expectations for what this guy can be in the long run, but I will say from watching tonight and just kind of seeing him a little bit in passing in the past, wouldn't mind him sticking around for at least the remainder of the season and getting an idea of what this guy can be. Now, granted, the big picture conversations regarding the Sixers team are far more important, and the most notable storyline there is their odds at keeping that top 6 protected draft pick. But despite that, the NBA continues to meddle in the Sixers business and have launched another investigation. So also leading up to tonight's matchup, we got this report from Shams Charania on the Pat McAfee show saying that the NBA has launched an investigation into the 76ers about Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Paul George missing games. Now, to be frank here, I understand the NBA's stance on preventing tanking. I understand their main concern is protecting the product on the floor, getting the best possible basketball on an every night basis. With that being said, that does not mean that their goals correlate to teams' goals, and it is objectively the right decision for a team like the Sixers to turn their attention to maximizing those lottery odds, because in the long haul, you can add an impact player that, frankly, there is not the upside to if you just go out and compete for the remainder of the season. And to be clear here, this is not a state in which these guys are throwing games. The guys are on the floor, are going to compete, they're going to try hard, and they're going to try and carve themselves a long-term NBA career. Players do not tank, but organizations do. Now, with all this being said, the Sixers, to me, are the clear example of a team that is in the spot based on the current circumstances. This is not a team that entered this season with the intentions of we're going to grab a top pick. This was a team that entered the season with the intention to compete for an NBA championship this year. And why has things gone off the rails? Well, it is not hard to find, as on a night like tonight, 95.98% of the salary committed to players this season were on the injured list. That leading into tonight, there were 8 fully healthy bodies on the Sixers team, that including the full 15-man regular season roster, the full-time roster there, as well as the 3 two-way guys, and the 10-day contract in Oshae Brissett there. Out of that combined, they had 8 healthy bodies to function on the floor. You're just not going to win a lot of basketball games when that is what you were stacked up against. Now, with this all being said here, again, I get it from a league perspective, but I think the Sixers are the straight-up wrong example of it. Have there been examples of this organization specifically tanking at an egregious level in years past? I'm not going to fight you on that, but I will look at you in this current situation with this current year, and the Sixers are the wrong guy. If you want to lay the hammer down and set the standard of the NBA is not having this, look elsewhere, my friend. And Mr. Adam Silver, take a peek across the northern border to the Toronto Raptors, who I think are a far clearer example of this. A guy like Emmanuel Quickley, who's in his mid-20s, a high-level, functioning, borderline all-star NBA player if he's at his best there. That's a guy who's just casually resting every other game for the sake of maximizing those same lottery odds. A team like the Utah Jazz, look at a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who's been in and out of the lineup all year. I know the Jazz just got fined $100,000, but when you look in the grand scheme of things, you think that's stopping Utah from rolling out a competitive roster that they could on a pretty much every night basis? That is not the state with the Sixers. Look at Joel Embiid. Look at the version of him that was on the floor in the 19 games that we did see from him this year. The dude could barely jump. He barely could sprint. And it is clear that he's dealing with the impacts of whatever the situation with that knee is. That is a player that is hurt. That is a player that should not be playing. Look at Paul George. All reports are indicating that he received injections to even be able to step on the floor and compete this season. That is a player that is hurt. That is a player that should not be playing. Look at Tyrese Maxey, a player that was dealing with multiple injuries to the point where he was shooting with 3 fingers, had adjusted his shooting form in order to continue being on the floor. And then on top of that, sustains a back injury that, frankly, I've never seen Tyrese Maxey writhing around in pain on the floor in the way that was the case after that injury here. That is a player that is hurt. That is a player that should not be playing. So while I understand the NBA's stance, and while I get that they are trying to crack down on this perception of tanking, the Sixers are straight up the wrong team that you should be looking to bring the hammer down. And with that being said, my personal opinion here, I think it's a losing battle to try and fight this tanking. When there are generational players like Cooper Flagg here, and I think generational is a little strong there. And by the way, prayers to Cooper Flagg, who did suffer a pretty significant looking sprained ankle in the conference tournament. Hope we do see him back for March Madness, because that guy is must-watch television there. But when there is a prize like that in the draft, teams are going to do what they can to get to him there. And when you look at actually building out rosters, if you're a team like the Utah Jazz or the Washington Wizards or the Charlotte Hornets, the Toronto Raptors, you're not going to be at the front of the pecking order when it comes to bringing in these high-level max contract star free agents here. The way that you get superstars is through the draft. So that is what these teams are going to do. The NBA made the system teams are going to take advantage of it. That is what's currently going on. And like we're even seeing reports of them investigating a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder. You think the Thunder are tanking? The team that's had one of the best 2 records in the NBA from start to finish this season. That is the clear-cut top team in the West. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. That is a youthful roster. I'm not as all in as I think a lot of people are talking, although I still would consider them the favorite in the West. No doubt about that there. But my point being here, that is not a team that is taking this. So it feels to me like the NBA is making the example of the wrong teams involved. I get the concept. I get what they're trying to do, but I think they're going about it the wrong way. And in a way, the Sixers have been the most ethical tanking team of this entire season. Now, with all that being said, there is still action that has to go down this season. That there's still, like it or hate it, there are 16 games that must be played by this Sixers team. They will be back in action against the Dallas Mavericks on Sunday. They will be playing the final 15 games of the season, and we know the stakes from an odds perspective for what they're holding on to with that lottery, with the NBA draft lottery there. So for the Sixers team, it should be business as usual. You got to pay $100,000 fine as the Jazz just did, then so be it. But frankly, I think these investigations should straight up be shut down, and I think there are far better ways that the NBA should be using their time. Maybe take a little bit of peek into how can we get the viewership back up, or why don't people care about the league? And while they'll push right back on maybe it's because star players aren't there, guess what? Guys get hurt when playing basketball. That's what happens, man, and that is the situation with the Sixers. So I am sick of this continuing to be dragged down. This is like the 3rd time this season that we've had to have a conversation about the Sixers getting investigated, this dating all the way back to the beginning with Joel Embiid here. So we'll see what happens from there. Ultimately, I think anything comes of this, but we'll give a little bit of a compliment one more time for this team to continue to buckle up and compete on the floor. Recording this immediately after the Pacers game there and feel pretty good about the product that was on the floor tonight. I understand this is not winning basketball. This is not what we signed up for from a season-long standpoint, but I can get by with a team that competed the way they did tonight, and ultimately we'll see how the cards fall at the end of the season. But to the NBA directly here, just lay off the Sixers for the rest of the year, man. We've seen enough of them meddling in the business of this organization, and none of it has turned out well. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes, but it should be business as usual for this Sixers team. Shout out to Oshae Brissett for bringing a little bit to this organization. Shout out to you guys for tuning into this video here. And one more time before I sign off, do want to remind you guys, make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. Once again, 67.6% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to us here on Sixers Digest just yet. We're going to keep plugging through this season, even if it is the miserable product that we continue to see on the floor. So I want as many of you as possible to join in this journey with me. So hit that button, drop a like, drop your comments below. I'll be back talking to you next time. Peace.